Hi all, welcome to another Kingscrusher radio show on the PlayChess server and streaming to YouTube as well. Hope you've all been having a good week so far. Start of the week, Tuesday. Okay, I have another 3 amazing games to show you of Kasparov. Let's have a look. This first game was against Florin Georgiu and it was played in Moscow 1982. Florin Georgiu he's 72 years old, still alive, born in Bucharest, awarded the IM title in 1963 and the GM title in 1965. He was World Junior Champion in 1963 and he won the Romanian Championship 9 times. So for any Romanian fans, this is a really amazing Romanian player. He tied for first at Hastings 1967-68. So Florin Georgiu, let's have a look at this game. D4 from Kasparov. Let's actually also connect a live book and add a Kibitzer. Let's add Houdini. Okay, we have knight f6 being played, c4, e6. Some people regard the Nimzo engine as one of the strongest ways of approaching d4. The Nimzo engine remains very, very popular, and of course white can avoid knight c3 and play into a queen's engine, knight f3, and usually it's d5 here actually is quite popular, or b6. b6 is played in this game. And one of Kasparov's pet lines is used in this position, which is a3. Quite often players play g3, but we have a3, which seems, from one perspective, to be a bit, maybe a little bit passive, you might think, just to stop any check. But white wants to be able to play knight c3 without the pin, so basically cutting out the Nimzo engine with a3. It's a very interesting move. So we have bishop b7, so black is exerting that powerful influence over the e4 square. Knight c3, and black really locks down on e4 now with d5. We have c takes d, knight takes d5. This is the most popular move actually, keeping the bishop free and open potentially on the diagonal. You might think e takes, it's not as much played, bishop's blocked in there, so knight takes is actually really quite popular, and we get a kind of Grunfeld defense type ideas here. In the Grunfeld defense, often black is capturing on c3. We have queen c2. Yeah, if white's, let's have a look at this position. Queen c2 is actually the main move, it seems. So you might think, well, can white play knight takes d5? I don't really think, this is being played very rarely, and I think it gives black a good position here. Black's got a good lockdown on things. It's not really thought to be a problem to take like that. It's just helping black a bit. But other moves, e3, that's reasonably popular. But queen c2 is the main move. Now quite often black takes on c3 immediately. Here we see c5, and now e4, knight takes, and you see we've got a kind of Grunfeld type position, sort of. Well, not really actually, because usually in the Grunfeld there's the fianchet bishop, but the center looks fragile, as if, I think that's my point, as if white wants to keep hold of all the center very carefully here, nannying the center. Black's not going to fianchetto here. We have bishop e7, and actually bishop e7 might actually be a slight inaccuracy, believe it or not. It's hard to believe. I mean, it seems like a natural move to prepare to castle, but you know, maybe knight d7 is a bit safer, because there's a very, very interesting idea which is sprung in this position, well, pretty soon actually. Bishop b5 check is an annoying disruptive check. For example, knight d7, this isn't played, but knight d7, there's knight e5. Things are getting nasty already in this position. For example, if we follow on like this, white's got the c6 square coming up and can gain basically a big positional edge and even win material. So that's scary actually, to play knight d7. So it's actually really a disruptive check, because knight c6 runs into other things which could be nasty, like queen a4, knight e5, and black's defending for dear life, and white might even take this pawn here with technically an advantage. I think rook a8 fells to bishop takes c6 because of that pin, as well as the more spectacular queen takes b7 is good for white as well. So black has to be treading very carefully, it seems, after this disruptive check. So the bishop is actually placed on c6, and you might think, that's not such a big deal, is it, to have to play bishop c6? Well, it's subject to potential tempo gains a little bit more easily. The interesting thing about tempo gains, they might lead somewhere which is completely undesirable. So the bishop is on c6. It's also taken a potentially good square. This bishop moves back. So is that a problem sitting on c6? Well, there's two potential tempo gainers on it, either knight e5 or d5 to factor in at various points. We have knight d7 seemingly covering the e5 square. So all seems okay at the moment. Castles. But immediately there is a concern about one of the tempo gainers. Although this has been extinguished, there remains, if black castles, d5 bang, because the h7 square here, this is undesirable, this position here. If we have a look at this, it's undesirable for black. King safety has been compromised. He doesn't want that position. So black plays actually the move h6. It's as if Kasparov's disruptive check is getting some ripples, which are evident now. Black having to play h6, black having to further delay castling. And now we get a subtle threat emerging here now, again after rook d1. If black routinely castles here, then yeah, d5. This is a real pain, because look at this, takes. If takes, we have the check now, winning the bishop. This is really unpleasant for black. What is he going to do? This? We just take there, just ripping apart black's king position. Maybe even this is the strongest, actually hitting h6 and d7. It's a disaster. So d5, black has to be careful about castling yet again, because if we look at this position, if this is undesirable, which it is, if we go here, then this is also undesirable, this position, bishop c4. So what would black actually do here? Probably best would be this, but white is sitting on nice positional, dare I say it, trump cards in this position. A nice pawn there, and it looks pretty good for white. a5 might even be on the way to harass that bishop with a6. So here again, black delays castling yet again with queen c7. And by strange coincidence, I've had a blitz game earlier this morning with similar ideas which I missed actually. So in post-mortem, Kasparov sees these ideas in this position and plays them. There's something not quite stable about black's position here. You might think it's stable in inverted commas. When we say stable, all the threats have been parried, there's nothing to rock the black position, but indeed it might not be the case here. Can you see what white can play? If I give you 20 seconds, anyone awake on stream or anywhere, white to play, what would you play? 200 points if you can guess it. White's play in this position. Is black's position stable, or is there some issues with it tactically? Okay, there's a move here which exploits the fact the king is still in the center. I think whatever the opponent's king's location, the attacking player needs to look at, you know, just the theoretical angles to how to get to the opponent's king, like these diagonals all the time. Yeah, it should be in the attacking player's thoughts, it seems. The great attacking players just know to find a route to the king. It's just at the moment in the center you might think, well, it's going to castle soon. But do you remember Mikhail Tal? He was always actually just getting there before they managed to castle. And here it's the case that Kasparov is a bit Tal-like here. He pounces whilst the king is still in the center. He wants to get onto this diagonal. He plays d5. And this is causing problems here. If black doesn't accept this pawn sack, well, say bishop b7. This is very nice for white. Bishop c4. This position here is dangerous. And if, for example, here, there's even horrible ideas actually like this, and this, and this. Horrible. There could be a meltdown tactically of black's position, getting mated in some lines. So yeah, no, you've got to be careful with black here about allowing this sort of position. Yeah, the king wouldn't be safe here. This position, king wouldn't be safe. And yeah, if, well, black took on d5 and took this pawn here, but now, guess what? What is this about, do you think? White's play in this position for another 200 points. What would you play in this position? I might have given you a slight clue earlier. You can even think of Paul Morphy's opera game as some inspiration. In Paul Morphy's opera game, there was a disaster leading to, spoiler alert if you don't want to hear the result, there was a checkmate on d8, but you know, the king in the center was exploited there with d8 square, but there might be other key squares in this position. Bishop b5, and you might think, well, this isn't a big deal. This isn't a big deal, surely, because we can do two things with black. We can defend d7 with bishop c6 and get the bishop out of the way, yeah? Because bishop f3 obviously fails to rook takes d7, but surely we can play bishop c6. In fact, bishop c6 wasn't played, and probably the reason why it wasn't played is bishop f4 looks strong here to distract the queen away from c6, and we're hitting then a8 and d7 if this is taken. That would be a disaster. Surely this isn't good. We can just take the rook. Black's best might be just castling queenside, and this isn't so safe with the bishop on the light squares. This position is good for white anyway, so that wasn't too attractive. Black actually chose a6 in this position, but actually he would have been better off with bishop c6, that technically is the best move to allow bishop f4 here. In fact, with the move a6, bishop f4 is even more effective than it was before. The king is not able to castle at all now. Kasparov has done the towel. This has happened to many of Towel's opponents. They were like one move away from castling. This tragic occurrence of being one move away from castling has now occurred because of bishop f4. Because now, after queen takes f4, I mean, what else? You know, if the queen moves, we just take here, and then bang, c4, winning material. Because queen g4, rook takes here. This isn't good. The king's pinned in the center anyway. Okay, so that's no good. But we have bishop f4, queen takes, yes, and the king is not allowed to castle. Bishop takes. We have rook takes, and although material's kind of equal, in fact black's a pawn up, the pressure is a lot here after rook e1, and you might think, well, really? Why can't black defend? He plays actually bishop d6. Why can't he play rook here? Why can't he do this? This didn't happen. He played actually bishop d6. So can you guess why this isn't so attractive in this particular position? Rook e8. What move is there available? Which is the most incisive move here? White's play. This is a variation. Okay, white play variation, which never happened. Why didn't rook e8 get played? The volume is too low. Sorry, let me just check my volume mixer. Oh, it's at 90. Oh, what on earth changes that? Sorry. I don't know what changes that. I'm sure I had the advanced settings. It should be a bit higher now. I don't know what changes that. But anyway. So what does white have in this position? Is the volume getting better, I hope? Well, there's two moves which guarantee an advantage, but the most crushing one, rook e5 is not bad, yeah, with this nasty pin. This isn't bad because we're kind of winning anyway with this line. But there's even stronger. That's like +2, but there's even stronger actually here. Technically, rook f5, going on to f7 in the 7th rank. This way is actually a bit stronger. It's just horrible. If the king tries to move away, queen e4, look, bang! Oh my god. The king goes here. Well, we just take here. There's a check, using this check, winning the rook. Yeah, that's even worse for black. Basically, it seems that rook f5 would be a crusher. So black played bishop d6, but we have the same theme occurring anyway. Rook f5, the rook coming to the 7th rank. Or is it? In this position, queen c4 protecting f7. But that's only temporary, right? Rook e4 drags the queen, tries to drag the queen away from f7. And it does actually. And then we have a rook on the 7th. King b8. And now another really forceful move. Doesn't give black a breathing spot with these moves. Rook e6. What does black do about this bishop? Well, we have rook d8 in the game. If the bishop goes to c7, here actually c4 is pretty nasty. Because where is the queen going actually? If the queen goes there, that looks awkward. And in fact, queen e4 is a forced checkmate coming up with rook takes c7. It's a forced checkmate, actually. b5, this is like a forced mate, apparently, this position. Yeah, you can see everything's going in there. It's horrible. So actually black played rook d8. But we have the same idea, c4. The queen is harassed still, and although the bishop is allowing queen c6, it's only a temporary reprieve because of knight e5 now, hitting the queen again. Queen's running out of squares rapidly here. Only got one. Queen c8 doesn't want to be taken, and black is okay, looking to take the rook, it seems, but this next move kind of decides things. There's actually two really crushing moves in any case. If you can spot either, 200 points due. But so the game ended on this next move. So white play the final move. You can either pick Kasparov's move, 200 points, or the engine move, 200 points, to be fair. I want to check, there might be another really strong one. In fact, there's at least 3 different really strong moves. We're talking plus 19. Sorry, plus 9 or something. 4. God, a lot of stuff wins actually in this position. No, there's loads of winning moves actually. There's loads of winning moves. Yeah, queen e4 is the most incisive threatening mate. So not allowing the queen to take the rook. And if here, what we do is just take here, check, and say the king has to go on that diagonal, check, double check. It's a disaster. But Kasparov played a nifty one as well. Queen b1. Anywhere, b2, b3, they're all winning. b2 or b3, just hitting b6. These all 3 just hitting b6 is all winning here. So Kasparov's queen b1. If black plays b5, then white simply just takes this, because if takes, then we end up with a killer pawn. Well, we end up with b7 after check. Pardon me, queen b7 is checkmate. The rook's supporting the queen anyway. Forget the killer pawn. It's a bit of an overkill. Yeah, that's just mating. Yeah. So if here, then black gets mashed. Check. Check. And look, the rook's hanging. That's all been taken, and look, we're even defending against this. Isn't that funny? Yeah, so queen b1 was the final move. I can only say the game looks close to some sort of masterpiece refutation to think the engine is not accepting bishop e7 here as the move. In fact, in live book, indeed, the engine agrees with the practice of the strong players in the live book of play chess, where knight d7 is given as the move. And this is why opening theory is so critical the higher you get, because you might just on general grounds play bishop e7. It seems everyone is playing knight d7 here. 272 games with knight d7, 76 with knight c6, but knight d7 might not have suffered the same horrible fate like in this game. There's no disruptive check, right? For a start, if bishop b5, we can kick that thing. If we get this position, I think it's safe enough. There's no sharks in the water here. d5 bishop f6. This should be safe enough, even if there's a slight pawn fracture. It's palatable according to engines. This is a palatable. It's playable. But it's staggering. But one inaccuracy of bishop e7, we get this very nasty disruptive check, which seems to guarantee white an advantage. It just seems to guarantee an advantage. That's incredible. Yeah, knight c6. As I mentioned, queen a4, and we're going up on c6 here. This is a variation we mentioned. At least winning a pawn, but you know, this is better than the game though. Even if black lost the pawn, this is better than the game. He could get to castle, right, and just be like a little bit of material down. It actually gets really like technical, but oh my god. But anyway, white ends up with an advantage there anyway. But it seems the trouble stems from bishop e7. I mean, who would believe this? Bishop e7 is like an inaccuracy tapped into. Yeah, the bishop b5 check is pretty nasty, basically. Is that shocking? If 1 is shocking and 10 isn't, well, did you think that inaccuracy is shocking? Or anyway, okay, let's go on to another game. I mean, how it can be exploited. I mean, all right, let's have a look at this other game now. The next game I'd like to show you. So Kasparov playing black here against Larry Mark Christiansen. Now, Larry Mark Christiansen, I actually did video annotate this on an individual video once, so it's like revision. His last FIDE rating 2574. He's 60 years old, USA, born in Riverside, California. So he gained, this is according to ChessGames.com, Christiansen gained a reputation as a very strong attacking player. 11 times member of the United States Olympiad team, earned his GM title in 1977 after winning at Torremolinos in the same year. 3 times winner of the US Championships in 1980, 1983, 2002. He's also won the 3 United States Open crowns. His international wins include first place at the Norris in 1979 and in 1981, the latter jointly with Karpov. So some of the first place include Cologne 1988, Wiesbaden 1994, Reykjavik 1998, Essen 1999. He's also authored several chess books, and he plays in the Bundesliga in Germany. So Christiansen played a lot there. Let's have a look. So d4 from Christiansen, knight f6. We have c4, g6. Kasparov plays his king's engine defense, and we get the dreaded 4 pawns attack system, quite an aggressive system against the king's engine. Kasparov castles, knight f3, and it's pretty standard to play c5 here. d5. Yes, and it is pretty standard to play it as though it's a Benoni here with e6, as though you don't mind the Benoni structure against the 4 pawns attack in particular. Now, quite often, players with black, players with white usually play bishop e2 here, and games would continue a bit like this usually, where it's Benoni structure, and so we have this position. Black tries to keep a lock on the dark squares, and there's a lot of games from this position. This is like start position here, but actually we have a slightly novel move. Instead of bishop e2, we have the slightly rarer taking, and it's got its own ideas basically. That one of them is, I believe, that if black takes, well, if black takes with the bishop, this is more frequent is with the pawn. Well, that pawn is slightly vulnerable, and white could try and play like positionally later. Even f5 though, that's not so pleasant. So usually f takes. This slightly weakens, note, the pawn chain around the king, taking like this. Okay, so bishop d3, and it looks as though e5 is a pain. Knight c6 tries to look after the dark squares, and here white castles. If he's too aggressive, and his king's still in the center, this doesn't really work at all to play this, by the way, because it's taking a knight g4. We're hitting violently e5, so it's a train wreck for white. This position, this is not good. Everything's weak. That's not good. So forget e5. Yeah, white just castles. Now here we have knight d4. This might actually be one of the more accurate moves in the position. If e5, f5, and you see there's only 2 pawns for black's king side here, and that's quite dangerous. Say this is kind of dangerous, because there's things like knight d5. But that looks a little bit similar to the game continuation. But we have knight d4 here. Try to stop f5 for the moment. Yeah, e5, f5. And because this bishop's like geared up to play f5 on e5, so black's delayed it. And he doesn't mind this. This isn't played because black's going to get nice squares like c5. That's okay. That's okay. Okay, so we have actually knight g5 being played. And now e5 might actually be threatened in this position, because there's some, remember there's only 2 pawns here, there's a weakened structure, so there might actually be some cheapos around after knight g5 involving the bishop and the knight and the queen. Example, a6, e5, takes, say here, almost not quite working actually because of f1. I don't think this works, this sort of thing, because of rook f1. It's getting a little bit dangerous though. So here, can't quite get e5 working, but you see that there's some danger points. So black, maybe he wanted to stop e5, he plays e5 himself, so he locks in the bishop with e5 but weakens d5 quite significantly. So this is an interesting kind of trade-off decision from Kasparov. It's also kind of hitting some dark squares, cementing the knight, but yeah, it looks like there's some interesting trade-offs here, securing that knight. Looks like a really nice knight on d4 though. We have f5 here. This one's kicked, and now g takes f5. And although this bishop's kind of tied down at the moment, it seems passively from white's pieces, there's a really energetic thing now being played by Kasparov. Very, very energetic, liberating move. I would say it's like one, if he really wants to win games in the King's Engine, he's often playing this move, this activational move. It might not be the soundest, but it really can cause a lot of problems. So black to play here, this might not be, the engines might not approve, warning. Black to play here, but from a practical point of view, it can set a lot of problems. Be be aware that this might be a subtle move. So, okay, so you know, guess the move. Be aware it might be a subtle move. Okay, sorry about that. For some reason I had this enthusiasm to tell you the move despite asking you to guess it, so yeah, I might have slipped out b5, yeah, and try and cover it up after, but anyway, unfortunately that one was spoiled, sorry about that. But anyway, it looks as though the diagonal could be dangerous. You know, it's a pawn, but this diagonal, in practical terms, you know, engines say, oh, just take the pawn, yeah, fine, but Christiansen, the human, didn't. He played this. Probably best is to take the pawn. Is it about the diagonal or about d5? Actually, black might be best to play d5, in fact. If he plays bishop b7, well, this is interesting as well, actually, but it might be more to the point that we can treat b5 as a central undermining move here. If c takes d5 is immediately kind of menacing pawn center. So if we're left with knight takes b5, this might be technically the most accurate. Now this position looks active for black, and I would say there might be enough compensation. It looks as though there should be enough compensation. In fact, black's getting that pawn. Should be fine. Should be fine. Black should be fine. But yeah, he didn't want to take this pawn. Maybe this is another thing. You know, Kasparov's getting a reputation. People are trusting him more. They don't want to take his material. They know how dynamically aggressive he is. It was ignored actually with bishop e3. But white's control of the center is being really challenged and undermined now. B takes, leaving only pieces to control the center. It's check. Now black threatens, actually knight takes f5 in this position, among other things. So we have bishop takes d4, taking out that knight. But look at black's pawns in the center. It looks as though white's trying to keep a grip on the center just with his pieces against these three amazing looking pawns. Is white keeping a bind with knight d5 or not? Yeah, white wants to try and keep a bind on the light squares, and you can imagine maybe like follow-up moves, like maybe even taking on f6 actually and queen here, and there'll be attacking pressure potentially. Maybe that's the most worrisome things. But black continues kind of to undermine the center control quite aggressively with this next move. Now I'll give you a choice: either choose Kasparov's move or the engine move, which the engine move also really likes for some reason, and I'd like to find out why. So 200 points for either. Black to play. So there's a fascinating engine move, and there's Kasparov's fascinating move as well. Black to play here. How would you undermine white's central control here? The year of this game is Moscow. It's Moscow 1982. So one suggestion is bishop b7. That does hit the center. e4, does that really undermine the center? I wonder about queen takes d4 there. Knight takes, does that really undermine the center? Let's rule out knight takes. I think white sits on the center. Actually, this is okay for black, because black can look forward to challenging things. It's okay for black. Kasparov's move was bishop a6, actually. So if taking, then this is really horrible. Knight takes, and we're going into e3, or maybe even queen b6 first. So this would be horrible, right? Knight takes f6 was played. Now, just fascinating curiosity. What is this about? The engine's move is actually rook b8. That looks a bit simpler than Kasparov's. And if b3, the idea is just to take this pawn out, because it's basically not just hitting that, it's taking this out of the equation. So taking out that pawn is, apparently this is really quite interesting for black, this position. But that's materialistic computer, because actually white still, visually at least, has some control over the central squares. For example, can try and get a knight maybe even to e4. But technically black has got good position and can do well here. But no, this, so from a human point of view, this actually looks more practical, just to hit the center with bishop a6. But yeah, there's a technical point here. Yeah, what does white do about this and this? If here, again, what does white do? Is he going to lose like the b2 pawn? Okay, but Kasparov's move looks more dramatic to me, and I like it better actually in many respects. So bishop a6, and it is a good advantage for black in any case. Bishop a6. We have knight takes f6. Bishop takes c4. And this is kind of, yeah, knight takes f6 probably is not maybe, apparently knight e3 might be a resource to consider. So we're hitting this bishop. If takes d5, this looks scary, but white might be able to get a lock down on some of the light squares basically, but black remains better. Those center pawns are moving forward after knight e3, but technically apparently this might be the better move to play. Knight e3 in this position, but knight takes f6 was played, which kind of loses the exchange. Actually, it kind of loses the exchange now. Yep. But the idea, the aggressive idea, here's an aggressive player, is not to just take there and take that, but actually to threaten mate and be able to take with the rook. So white threatens mate and is able to take with the rook, therefore. So queen d7 pins the pawn actually, which is useful, as well as defending against the mate threat. And okay, black's the exchange up, but are there some threats here? We have d3. While this pawn is pinned, and it's not looking as though there's anything significant. Now queen f3 not only unpins, it looks down on this rook, so this rook's kind of tied down, protecting its friend over here. And isn't white threatening things like f6 potentially. It looks as though f6. Should be a concern, but Kasparov played d2. So that's what, and now g4 was played, not f6. If f6, actually we just take and play here, because this pawn is not so insignificant in this position combined with this pin. Actually, we have two nasties coming together, a pin and a dangerous passed pawn, apparently leaving white in an undefendable position, because the threat here is to take on f6 and then just queen the pawn after. If white hurries to attend to the pawn, yeah, the knight's dropping, and disposition is just really good for black, the exchange up. So yeah, just casually ignores the threat, the apparent threat, by this pawn is now saying to white, you haven't got f6. So g4 was played. We have rook ac8, and now this pawn again is rearing its head. No getting away from this pawn, it seems. If we try f6 in this position, again, just bishop takes. The thing is, bishop takes. And in fact, even stronger than queen e6 here, because there might be like g5, but even stronger is just rook here. And if it takes, we just take on f3, and this pawn is coming through horribly. So yeah, f6 is just ruled out totally. We have queen d3. Now it looks as though, hold on a sec, isn't okay, isn't it possible that f6 might be dangerous or not? And what about rook c1? Well, I'll just rule out rook c1 for you. Rook c1, actually white can just take here and get a position which might have some play in it still. So rook c1 wasn't played. But the story of the pawn carries on, actually. Kind of. With this next very powerful move. In fact, this move is so powerful, it's the top engine move. And it's not like a simple move to spot, actually. I don't know if you'll be able to find it. Black to play, 200 points, maybe you've seen the game before. But it kind of echoes the pawn yet again as being very dangerous in this position. This next move by Kasparov echoes the pawn, that's my clue to you, and echoes some kingside weaknesses as well at the same time. So black to play, what can black play in this position? It is tactically a crushing blow, really. Right, some of you said, well, one of you have said e4. Actually, what we do is just take the pawn there. No. This is a remarkable move, actually. Queen a4 with the idea of taking here if it takes, yeah. So white defends that. You know, if he takes here, this is horrible because both knights seem, one of them's going right. Yeah, for queen here, then we take this one. Here we just take that one. So yeah, no, it's not a good idea to allow queen takes g4. So we have knight f2, but look, the queen's kind of potentially supporting d1. We have now queen d4. So now black, if given another move, would take, and then e4, e3 winning. White hasn't got that many choices actually here. If he plays rook d1, I know that the knight's protecting the queen, but again, you know, just takes an e4 just in time is horrible. Yeah, we're just going to crash through. Actually, with rook c1, technically best, and then e3 maybe if needed. So white snaps off this queen, and we have knight f4. And actually we've got a bit of a fight going on now, because after rook fe8, it's not so easy to use this pawn. If rook c1 was played, knight g6 check. Remember the knight's on d1. The knight's on d1, so we can just take this actually safely because the knight's on d1. So actually, yeah, Kasparov has to get out of the way here of knight g6. And he tries to make the rook useful as well, but knight comes to e6. So play continues. Rook c1, knight d1, we have bishop f6. This is actually a really strong move, it seems. Bishop f6. With the idea potentially bishop h4 to e1, so we can take on d1. King f2, which comes just in time for this pawn, because now if check, I think we have king e2, if bishop e1, we're holding the knight here, so this one can move and maybe come here, and it's not over. So king f2 seems a very good move actually under the circumstances. Bishop g5, king comes to e2. Now rook c5 with the idea of the check, and to e1 maybe later. King d3, rook e5. Now knight takes, h takes. So yeah, Kasparov is playing the exchange up. This pawn is not touched here. We see instead rook f2, which might be technically one of the best moves. If the pawn is taken, check. This position isn't so great for white. Yeah, these pawns are kind of loose. For example, this one. We have rook f2. So now if rook e1, we can take here, and white's still in the game a bit. White might be able to hold on a bit longer. Okay, but rook e4 was played, hitting that pawn immediately. And now a great move. Okay, so black to play here. So it seems to be a very accurate move here. Black to play here was played. Yeah, okay. Rook e3 was played, so going after this pawn actually. Not minding knight takes now, because this is... You might think this is a blockade here, but no, it's not. We just queen with check. So you'd be wrong. Yeah, we're just queening there. yeah, that would be hopeless. And if here, then we have e2. So basically, king takes is the only move, one of the only moves. If takes here or here, well, it's the game continuation. Well, no, if takes here, rook takes is better for black, with rook g3 coming up. But white played actually king takes the pawn on d4. We have this check. Actually, instead of taking, well, he can't take on h3 now because of the rook. His idea is rook e2, driving the rook away from d2, and now really trying to promote his pawn with rook e1. So yeah, this is just winning because of the pawn, it seems. You might think, well, what about knight f2? Here, not this, because knight takes, and then that's a bit of a disaster. No. On knight f2 wasn't played, but on knight f2 we have this, and the pawn is really coming through after rook takes f2. So f6 was tried, but now rook f4. f6, pardon me, f6 was tried, and now rook f4. And this leaves white helpless now. The king could always step in, by the way, if, well, taking here, we have king g7. Of course, so that leaves nothing to say anymore about the position. This position is also just a rook down. So rook f4 was the final thing. So this game actually shows a remarkable level of appropriateness to what is kind of a novel idea. Instead of the bishop e2, this idea, it's quite novel, you know, compared to bishop e2 basically, but it's Kasparov played so appropriately, it seems, to this surprising, you know, d takes e6. Yeah, usually routinely bishop e2 is played here. We're talking 1200 games bishop e2, and only about 280 with this, but the appropriateness of black's play is really at a high level. You know, entrenching the knight on d4, hitting white center really hard, and very, very effective. So Kasparov didn't seem to be at all disturbed by the novelty of this d takes e6. As a if you're a King's Indian player, you might find this a little bit novel in the four pawns attack to play d takes e6 here. Okay, I hope you found these two games of interest. We've done a bit of an hour. Let's not make these too long, these sessions. Any comments, questions, likes, appreciated on YouTube if you've got any other questions. Okay, so thanks for coming, and I think we'll leave it there this week. Yeah, that first game was mega accurate, and this is like mega appropriate to what is a surprising thing, I would say. Okay, see you next week then. Thanks for coming.